neighbor's house despite having been shot more than 5 times. Someone had come into his home, shot and stabbed his entire family, and then set the house on fire. He knew who the attacker was, and he knew his entire family was dead. His wife, his 2 sons, and his 16-year-old daughter, Erin. As he was being transported to the hospital, he was informed that Erin had also miraculously survived the attack. But as the investigation into the crime began, it quickly became clear that her survival was anything but miraculous. This is Monsters. Terry Caffey met Penny Daly at a church function when he was in his early 20s. There was an immediate attraction, and 8 months later they were married. Their first child was Erin, who was born on July 27, 1991. Matthew followed on June of 1994, and then their final child was Tyler, who was born in April of 1999. Religion was a big part of the Caffeys' lives, and they were all very involved at Miracle Faith Baptist Church. Penny played piano, Erin sang in the choir, and Matthew played guitar. Terry and Penny both served as youth ministers, and they even moved to be closer to the church. They had lived about an hour away but moved to Alba and Rains County, which made their drive to church only about 10 minutes. The kids all started attending public school, but during her 8th grade year, a girl kissed Erin in the hallway, and the Caffeys pulled all of their children out of their schools and began homeschooling them. Erin was described as a social person, and after being pulled out of school, her whole life was constrained to home and church. The Caffeys were described as being overly protective of Erin. When Erin turned 16, she got her driver's license and a job at the local Sonic drive-thru. Her coworkers described her as extremely sheltered. They said she was naive and didn't know how the world really worked. There are people who still ask how a girl from a decent family who never suffered any abuse can end up being involved in killing her own family. While researching this case, I heard it doesn't make sense so many times, but it does. When children are being raised, shielding them from any type of problem is not good for them. Children need to experience problems so they learn how to deal with them. It would be revealed that Erin had been thinking about killing her parents for a while before the actual murders, and it was because she just didn't like that her parents were strict about boys. I think her being sheltered gave her an unrealistic view of how big that problem was. Charles Wilkinson, who went by Charlie, was a few years older than Erin. In the summer of 2007, he had completed basic training at Fort Sill in Oklahoma for the Texas National Guard. The U.S. military has a program where, if you want to join the military after high school, you can complete your basic training during the summer before your senior year. During the school year, Charlie would train with the National Guard 1 weekend a month, and he planned to go on active duty once he graduated. He wasn't necessarily a bad kid. He had never been in trouble with the law, and he hadn't had disciplinary problems at school, but his friends said he could be a bit of a hothead. He was quick to anger, but he tended to storm off over getting into a fight. Once he returned from training, he stopped at the Sonic for a meal where Erin delivered his food. He would say in an interview that it was an instant vibe. He continued to visit with her at the restaurant until after Halloween, when he worked up the nerve to ask her out. From that point, their lives became only about each other. Before the new school year had started, Matthew had told his parents that he missed his friends, so they re-enrolled the boys in public school that year. But Penny continued homeschooling Erin. It was in December that Erin said she also wanted to go back to public school, and the Caffeys agreed. They felt like it would be nice to free up Penny's time so she could do other things. The reason Erin wanted to return to public school was simple. Charlie was there. She was a freshman and he was a senior at Rains High School, and they spent every minute they could together. sometimes skipping class so they could go to Erin's car and make out. Terry recalled his first meeting with Charlie not going well. He said he arrived home from work to see Charlie lounging in his recliner, and when he approached him and said, quote, "You must be Charlie," the kid responded, quote, "Who are you?" Now, he claims that he must be old-fashioned, but I don't know. I'm not old-fashioned, and I would expect a little more respect from a young guy who was dating my daughter. Anyway, Terry and Penny talked about him and decided that he was probably a harmless high schooler. He couldn't help it if he wasn't taught any manners, but they would keep their eye on him. Charlie and Erin's relationship quickly became sexual, and soon the young man was presenting his girlfriend with a ring. Now, he said it wasn't an engagement ring, it was a promise ring, but it wasn't just a cheap piece of jewelry. It had belonged to either his mother or his grandmother. There are conflicting reports, but it was a family heirloom. When the Caffeys saw the ring, they were not happy. In the short time the teens had been dating, Terry's feelings about Charlie had not gotten better. He was over at their house every day, and once Penny had walked into the bathroom to find him looking through their medicine cabinet. He played it off, saying he was looking for something for a headache, and both Terry and Penny told him to ask, not just go through their medicine cabinet. It was only a week later that Terry caught him doing the same thing again. When they learned about the promise ring, they made Erin return it and told Charlie it was inappropriate. Then they limited the couple's time together. Of course, that only made Erin want to be with Charlie more. Erin told her parents that she could legally move out when she turned 17 and that she planned to go live with Charlie. Terry and Penny asked her how they were going to pay for everything, and Erin just said Charlie would take care of it. Yeah, of course he would. It was in February that Penny stumbled across Charlie's MySpace page, which was filled with references to drinking and sex. Not only that, but he also swore constantly on his page. The Caffeys were horrified, and they had a talk with Erin about breaking off her relationship with Charlie. To their surprise, Erin told them that she was already planning to break up with Charlie, but just didn't know how to do it. Erin said she would tell Charlie was over that evening at their Bible study, and the Caffeys felt a sense of relief at the prospect of having the young man out of their lives. The breakup happened on February 27, 2008, and only 3 days later, Charlie would get his revenge on the Caffeys. Terry worked for a company called Praxair, which distributes gases, and part of his job was to set up oxygen concentrators in patients' homes. Those are medical devices that help give medical patients more oxygen, and it can be needed in someone's home with little notice. Because of that, Terry was on call for the weekend of March 1st and 2nd of 2008, which took effect at the end of his shift on Friday, February 29th, Leap Day. He made sure his van was stocked in case he got a call and was about to head home when a call came in for an oxygen setup in Dallas, which meant he would be working late. He called Penny to let her know and headed west to get to the patient's house. Terry arrived home at about 9:30 p.m., exhausted from a long day, ate some dinner, and went to bed. Before he did, he gave all 3 kids a kiss and said goodnight. Everyone was home, ready for bed, and as far as Terry and Penny knew, their family was through their rough patch and ready to move on to better days. It was in the early hours of March 1st that Terry was awoken by the bedroom door being opened and slamming into the wall. Terry said he initially thought Tyler was running into the bedroom after having a bad dream, but he didn't have much time to think when gunfire erupted. Penny screamed, and Terry tried to protect her by putting his arm out in front of her, but the bullets did not discriminate. One hit his wrist, then his forearm, his upper arm, and then his shoulder. Finally, another bullet tore through his right cheek and knocked him out of the bed. He had lost consciousness, but was not dead. The intruder used a sword and nearly decapitated Penny before moving on to the other bedrooms in the house. When Terry regained consciousness, he heard Matthew and Tyler screaming and crying. Then he heard Matthew yell, quote, "Charlie, why are you doing this? No, Charlie, no." Then there were gunshots followed by silence. Terry was stuck between the bed and the wall, and as much as he tried to get up to save his children, his injuries were too severe and he passed out again. The next time he woke up, he was surrounded by smoke and he was blinded by the blood that had run into his eyes. He finally managed to pull himself out from between the bed and the wall, and he checked Penny. Realizing that she was beyond help, he tried to get to his children by going through one door that went into a hallway that led to their rooms. As soon as he reached it, the flame shot out and pushed him back into the bedroom. He tried to go through the other door in their room that would take him through the kitchen, but the flames had already engulfed that section of the house. Terry had no other option but to turn into a bathroom and, after struggling to get the window open, blinded by blood and smoke and with only one working arm, he was able to pull himself through. He dropped about 5 feet or 1.5 meters to the ground and, aware that the killers could still be in the area, he hid behind a large propane tank. Terry assumed someone would see the fire and call 911, so he just needed to hold on long enough for them to get there so he could tell them that Charlie and a second unknown person were responsible. It was then that he realized that the propane tank was not the best thing to be near while a fire raged nearby, and he crawled further away from the house and laid next to a log. He waited and waited as windows shattered and then part of the house collapsed, but no emergency vehicles arrived. It was a rural area, so the houses weren't close, but Terry thought someone would still be at least able to hear the commotion. His closest neighbor was 1,200 feet or 365 meters on the other side of a wooded area, so Terry started crawling. He would go as far as he could, then have to stop and rest. He tumbled into a creek and had to climb his way out. When he finally made it to the neighbor's house, he laid on the porch and banged his good arm against the door. Finally, the neighbor answered and called 911. When sheriff's deputies and EMTs arrived, Terry was stabilized and moved to an ambulance. The whole time, the deputies were getting as much information as they could, and when they asked him who did it, he told them it was Charlie Wilkinson. Terry would later say, at that point he made sure the authorities knew that Charlie was responsible and he believed he could die and be with his family. As far as he knew, his entire family was gone. Penny, his 2 sons, and his daughter. Charlie's actions were those of a scorned lover who was taking revenge on his ex-girlfriend and her family. But he would be wrong in more ways than one. First, he didn't die. He was rushed to the local hospital in Sulphur Springs, where doctors patched him up the best they could and got him prepared for the longer journey to a trauma center in Tyler. There he learned that most of the bullets went through his body, missing any vital organs. He had 2 bullets lodged in his shoulder, which would be removed surgically. The bullet that hit him in the face went through his right cheek, traveled through his sinus cavity, and exited through his left ear. He underwent surgery, ending in better shape than was expected. He didn't even lose the hearing in his left ear. The second thing he was wrong about was, as he lay in a hospital bed for days, healing from the worst of his wounds, authorities would learn the true motivations for the destruction of the Caffey family in their home. Chief Deputy Kurt Fisher shook his head when he heard Charlie Wilkinson's name come out of Terry's mouth. It was a small town and everyone knew everyone else. His own sons had gone fishing with Charlie. The deputy had actually recognized Charlie's car at the trailer of a man named Matthew Wade who lived near the Caffeys. As Terry was being whisked away to the hospital, the chief deputy and another deputy went to the trailer to question Charlie. Inside, they found Charlie laying in a bed and there was a handgun lying on the floor near him. Charlie was awake, so the deputy ordered to see his hands and he was taken outside. When the other deputy went back into the house to get his boots, he saw that they had blood spatter on them. Once Charlie was taken away from the property, Deputy Fisher waited for a search warrant and went back into the trailer to search it. He found a purse in the living room, and inside was Erin Caffey's driver's license. In the bedroom where Charlie had been, there were spent shell casings on the floor as well as a box of ammunition. He pulled a blanket off of what appeared to be a pile of something, and there was a young blonde girl. When the deputy asked who she was, she said Erin. He brought her into the living room and asked her how she got there, but she acted confused and asked where she was. When he asked her what had happened, she just said, "Fire." She was taken to the hospital in Sulphur Springs and checked out. Officer Shayna Sanders worked for the Rains County School District and was known to many students, so she was brought in to question Erin further. Just in case people outside the U.S. are curious, it's not uncommon for schools to work directly with law enforcement to be on site and try to help increase security and cut down on school shootings. That, along with installing bulletproof safe rooms and arming all of the teachers, because, reducing access to guns is just crazy. When Erin was questioned, her answers were timid and childlike. Multiple times she said she was 14 years old. She explained that the house filled up with smoke and then two guys with swords appeared and ordered her to get on the floor. The next thing she remembered, she was at the trailer and then she drank, quote-unquote, some stuff, and then she blacked out. She ended her interview by saying, quote, "They're coming after me." It was immediately noticed that Erin did not smell like smoke. If you've never been around a property fire, I can tell you for a fact that everything smells like smoke and it's nearly impossible to get the smell out. I had just one half of my garage catch fire and everything reeked of smoke forever. Just walking through one cloud of smoke made me immediately smell like smoke. Ever notice you can always tell when someone just sat near a campfire? You don't walk out of a house fire and smell fresh and clean only hours later while wearing the same clothes. The investigators were immediately cautious about accusing her of anything at that point because she had just lost her mother and brothers, and it was possible she was also a victim. It quickly became clear that Erin was in no way a victim when Charlie was questioned at the sheriff's station. Charlie had first told the deputy who arrested him that he had gotten drunk the night before, but when he was told that Terry survived and identified him, he began telling investigators what had happened. He explained that Erin had called him the day before and was venting about her parents. The agreement to break up with Charlie had been a lie, and she was pissed that her parents wanted her to not be with him. According to Charlie, she told him she wanted them dead. Charlie claimed that he encouraged her to just run away, but she insisted that they needed to die. After that, he convinced a friend, Charles Wade, the younger brother of Matthew Wade, to help him kill the family in exchange for $2,000. Erin had told him that they would find cash in a lockbox in the house. Charles's girlfriend, Bobby Johnson, drove them in her silver Dodge Neon. When they first arrived at around 1:30 a.m., the Caffey's dog started barking, so they aborted the plan and left. Erin called Charlie and told him she would make sure the dog stayed quiet, so they returned and picked her up at the end of the driveway. They drove around for an hour talking about the plan. Charlie claimed that he tried to talk Erin out of it multiple times, asking her to run away with him, but she wouldn't budge. He explained that she was adamant that her parents needed to die. They agreed that Charlie would kill her parents and that Charles would kill her brother so there were no witnesses. They returned to the house and the girls waited in the car while the boys went in through the front door, which Erin had left unlocked. They went to Terry and Penny's room first, where Charlie fired a .22 caliber pistol until it jammed. He handed the gun to Charles, who unjammed it and fired 2 more rounds. Charlie used the sword to cut Penny's throat. The sound of gunfire woke Matthew and Tyler, and they locked themselves in Erin's room. They were likely looking for protection from their big sister, only to find her gone. Charlie coaxed the boys out of the room, and 13-year-old Matthew tried to fight Charlie, but Charles shot him in the face. According to Charlie, then Charles stabbed 8-year-old Tyler repeatedly with a sword. Believing Erin's family was dead, Charlie grabbed a suitcase that she had previously packed from her room and took it to the car. Charlie claimed that Erin was happy and told him, quote, "I'm glad it's over." The boys went back into the house and found the lockbox, which Erin had given them the code for. They took the cash inside along with cash from Terry's wallet and Penny's purse. It all totaled $375. They went around the house and set furniture and bed sheets on fire and then fled the scene. They drove around for a little while before Charlie and Erin were dropped off at Matthew Wade's trailer where they had sex. When Charlie was finished detailing the events of the morning, authorities picked up Charles after pulling him over driving Bobby's car. They picked up Bobby at the restaurant where she worked. They both tried to play dumb initially, but eventually told investigators what they each knew. Their stories matched Charlie's. By then, Erin had been tested for drugs and her system was clean. She had acted like and vaguely claimed she had been drugged somehow, but science disagreed. All of the information came together as Erin was headed to the hospital in Tyler with her grandparents to visit her father. On the way, Officer Sanders received a call instructing her to place Erin under arrest. They had to pull over and take her from her grandparents' car in the middle of their trip. Back at the hospital, Terry was eagerly awaiting to finally see his daughter, who had managed to survive the horrible attack. After asking multiple times when they would get there, Terry's sister Mary had to break the news that Erin had been involved in the attack and she had been placed under arrest. Since Erin was the only one of the 4 suspects who was under 18, she was taken to a juvenile court where she declined to be interviewed by investigators. She instead gave a written statement of the events of the morning where she maintained that she saw smoke, then saw intruders with swords, and that she couldn't remember anything else. I'd say it didn't take long for Erin's story to be proven untrue, but it wasn't really ever considered realistic. She was clean, both physically and based on toxicology. She had not been in a smoke-filled house, and she had not been drugged. When investigators looked at phone records, they revealed much more to the story. Charlie had claimed that Erin had called him and said she could keep the dog quiet, but my heart tells me there have been enough deaths. The prosecutor honored his wishes and offered the 3 adult defendants plea deals. Charlie Wilkinson and Charles Wade were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Johnson was sentenced to 20 to 40 years. Terry urged the prosecution to offer Erin a plea deal as well. They initially offered 3 life sentences plus 50 years, but Terry wanted Erin to be able to be free at some point in her life. They reduced it to 2 life sentences plus 50 years, which really wasn't any different. Finally, the prosecutor offered 2 life sentences plus 25 years, which would allow Erin to be eligible for parole when she was 59 years old. The plea was accepted and Erin was sent to the William P. Hobby Prison for Women. Terry went on to forgive his daughter, which I always think is a mistake. I know people say that you can't move on without forgiveness and blah blah blah, but in my opinion, that's a bunch of self-help bullshit. There are some things that are unforgivable. If you kill my wife and/or my children, you will never be forgiven. I don't care how much remorse you show. You took the most important parts of my world away from me forever, and that's completely unforgivable. I will have no problem living the rest of my life having not forgiven you, even if you're my child. Obviously, if one of my kids gets in trouble, even committing a crime, I'm going to be able to forgive them 90% of the time. If they kill their mother or sibling, it's not happening, especially if they were the instigator and driving force behind the crime. Of course, Terry believes that Erin was not the one who planned the murders and that her involvement was minimal because he's been manipulated by her just like Charlie was. He claimed in an interview that she was vulnerable and Charlie was a controlling psychopath. Of course, that doesn't explain why she would also suggest killing her parents to a prior boyfriend or why she was the one who pushed for the murders when she was repeatedly asked to just run away. But denial is a strong drug. And of course, Terry's story is filled with unimaginable heartbreak. His struggle through not only surviving the attack, but making it through the loss of his entire family, either by fire or prison, is amazing. But denying that Erin was as involved as she was is not helping anybody learn from the tragic incident. For many years, Erin maintained that, though she wasn't really drugged and kidnapped like she had originally claimed, she wasn't involved in the planning or even the suggestion of killing her family. Of course, that opened the door for many other questions, like, why did you lie about being drugged and kidnapped? Why would you go off and have sex with the person who had just murdered your family? Most people don't consider how ridiculous their lies are, though. In 2014, the story was featured on Dr. Phil. I want to make sure everyone knows that the doctor part is in air quotes, where Erin admitted to asking Charlie to kill her parents. Now, she didn't necessarily come clean. She really wanted to maintain her innocence, but she very reluctantly said yes when Mr. McGraw asked her if she had asked Charlie to kill her parents. They also had Michael Washburn on the show, where he described his interaction with Erin when she asked him to kill her parents. Despite all that, Terry still seems to have a difficult time accepting that his daughter fully planned the murder of him, her mother, and her two brothers and manipulated a boy into carrying it out for her. She was interviewed again in 2016 by Piers Morgan, and she again admitted that she was responsible for the murders, but it was still not entirely straightforward. It seemed like that admission had to be dragged out of her. It seems like she knows her father is easily in denial about the true extent of her involvement, and she's more than happy to continue allowing him to live that way. Not only being the person who got her mother and brothers murdered, but now continues to allow her father to live a lie because she's too much of a monster to take responsibility for her actions. If you're the victim of domestic abuse, please reach out to someone for help. Please talk to your local shelter or call the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can go to thehotline.org to chat with someone online. If you're having feelings of harming yourself or someone else, or even just need someone to talk to, please contact your local mental health facility, call 911, or call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline by simply dialing 988 in the United States. They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and will talk to you about any mental health issue you might be facing. If you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community and suffering from discrimination, depression, or are in need of any support, please contact the LGBT National Hotline at 1-888-843-4564 or go to lgbthotline.org. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, you can subscribe to this show so you don't miss an episode. My other show, Somewhere Sinister, is no longer getting new episodes, but you can check it out if you like interesting stories from history that aren't necessarily true crime, but true crime adjacent. It's available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can also check out my personal vlog, Jiles with a J, which is sporadically updated with stuff about my personal life, travel, and music. It's available on YouTube. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. A link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.